Scott Holiday here, and welcome back to Plus 2 Wrestling and happy Royal Rumble. The Royal Rumble is this Saturday, and I thought before we get into things, I'll give you a quick prediction / fantasy booking for what's going to go down at the Royal Rumble. My final two in the Men's Rumble, I think, are going to be CM Punk and John Cena. I think we relight that fire between these two old rivals that know each other so well, and those are our final two. With two world champions, you can kind of do something like this because you're still going to have someone else battle for one of those main titles that is not one of these old-time legends. If it was up to me, the insane thing that I would love to see happen is I want CM Punk to win this Royal Rumble. And then we do the sad Cena thing where he's like, I came back, but now I have no road to WrestleMania. Like, he forgets he's John Cena and can just be like, I want to have a match with someone, and everybody will run to the ring. He's just like, I have no road to WrestleMania. I can't challenge Gunther. I can't challenge Cody. Oh, no. And then Cena gets an idea as the people get behind him that he should challenge for the people's title. And we get thrice in a lifetime Cena versus The Rock. I know. Boo. I know. But when that gets announced, CM Punk comes in and says, I know who I'm going to challenge for winning the Royal Rumble. And it's The Rock for that People's Championship. And we get the triple threat match that should have main evented WrestleMania 29 when I paid $400 for tickets. I'm not still bitter about that. In the Women's Rumble, I also want to go out on a limb here. I say we end up at WrestleMania with Rhea Ripley going one-on-one with Jordynne Grace. Let's bring in Jordynne Grace, hot off of her TNA run, have her be a surprise, win the Rumble, and go on to WrestleMania. At this point, who do you really think can beat Rhea Ripley? She is the monster champion of the women's division. Maybe Jordynne Grace. I think that'd be a good matchup. So those are just my quick throwaway predictions before we get into the Soapbox. Hey, Scott here. You probably saw a much happier Scott a moment ago do the cold open. That was recorded a while ago. This was supposed to be me breaking down the top 10 independent wrestlers to watch in 2025. But before I sat down here to record, I heard a lot about a moonsault that J.D. McDonough did. And I was like, you know what? Before I record, let me sit down and watch this match. I don't normally watch Raw. Let me check out the Judgment Day versus the War Raiders. And dear God, that moonsault was disgusting. It's one of the most horrifying things I've seen. And I was like, you know what? I need to break that down. So let's break down that moonsault. But I must say, I was planning on doing a top 10 list and doing the plugs at 5. So I have to plug a bunch of stuff. So before we get into that, let's plug in. Saturday, February 8th at Harrah's Casino in Philadelphia, Superpowers of Wrestling presents Key to the City, where in our main event, the gold champion, the Feral Face, goes one-on-one with Willie Mack. Plus, in a dumpster match, it will be Homeless Vaughn battling Calculating Kurt Robinson. Plus, Rick effin' Blade and Simon Gotch team up to take on The Rep. And in a Key to the City ladder match, it's the Blackout versus Pat Dynamite and Hank the Buffalo from Buffalo Wild Wings. It's going to be an absolutely insane time, so please join us for Key to the City February 8th. You can get your tickets at spowrestling.com. February 22nd in Atlantic City, New Jersey at ACX1 Studios. It is the 26th anniversary of Combat Zone Wrestling. Come celebrate 26 years of ultra violence, and we will present to you the in-ring return to the Combat Zone of Nick Gage. Also, the in-ring return to CZW of Jimmy Lloyd, plus WWE ID prospect Marcus Mathers goes one-on-one with Rich Swann. Be sure to join us for the 26th anniversary of CZW. You can get your tickets now at czwrestling.com. All right, plugs are over. I'm back on my soapbox. Let's get into this and break down that Asahi Moonsault and explain why I think it's one of the worst things I've seen in professional wrestling in some time. But before we get into that, I just want to clarify one thing, and that is throughout this analysis, I feel like I'm going to use a specific term. I'm going to say JD is dead. And I want you to know that that's not me using hyperbole or anything like that. Someone being dead in the term of wrestling means that they are playing. They are unconscious. They are selling unconsciousness. They're laying on their back, not moving. There's kind of different ways to sell, and often like a babyface will sell like suffering, but oh, they have so much heart. Oh, this arm hurts. We gotta keep going. And then the other way to sell is to sell dead, where you've taken so much damage you are just out on the mat, not moving. So when I say that he's dead, just know that I mean he's selling dead, not that I'm making light of the situation or that he is deceased. Okay, just want to clarify that. Now into breaking this down, the first question you should ask yourself is, why is this move happening? Meaning, what is the story of the match that justifies this event taking place? And the answer to that question is actually quite confusing. See, what happens leading up to this event is Dominic Mysterio hits an unalive dive. He jumps through the ropes, takes out Ivar, rolls back in. Ivar's getting back to his feet. JD then steps in, hits the Asahi Moonsault. JD is not legal at this point. Ivar is not legal either. So it is just two illegal men battling outside the ring. So the only real justification for JD to be doing this is to stop Ivar from getting into the ring illegally, because again, he's not the legal man. This would make sense if Dom was going for the cover on Eric, or if you had Eric in a submission move that Ivar might want to break up. Neither of those things are true. There's not really a good reason for an Asahi Moonsault to wipe out Ivar in that moment. And this actually should be made more obvious by the fact that the camera misses it. And if you step back into kayfabe, the camera should miss that move, because that shouldn't be considered important in the world of sports. Neither of them are legal. Neither of them are in the match. Currently, the match is between Dom and Eric. Those are the two people that could win or lose the match at that moment. So the camera should be focused on those two. This would be like if in the middle of a football game, in the middle of a play, the camera chose to focus on something going on the sidelines. That doesn't make sense. So it's a little weird that this move is even taking place. The next question you should ask yourself is, why is this move happening? Meaning, why is JD McDonough performing an Asahi Moonsault? JD McDonough is part of one of the biggest heel stables in professional wrestling right now. Like, in terms of heel stables, they are right under the Bloodline, really, in terms of importance to the stories of the WWE. But they're also kind of a comedy act? Like, the Judgment Day in 2024 had the worst record in ring. And sure, Finn Balor is considered a pretty decent threat. When Damian Priest was the head of the Judgment Day, he was, in fact, the champion. But overall, Dom is playing like second fiddle to Liv. Carlito is always playing PlayStation more than he's wrestling. And out of all of them, JD McDonough is the joke character of the joke stable. Like, he's definitely the lowest on the totem pole. So why is he doing a move that would pop the crowd? Like, let's take that exact moment again. Dom is legal. Eric is legal. Ivar, outside the ring, he just got wiped out. Just laying there. If JD McDonough were to turn and just deliver a swift kick to the back of the head, standing on the apron, just a full penalty kick, what would the reaction to that be? Oh, look at the Judgment Day taking every opportunity. He's not even the legal man. There's no reason for this. That's good heat. But instead, he does an Asahi Moonsault, something that will take your breath away if you're watching. It surprises me from a storytelling point of view that JD McDonough would do something spectacular in that moment instead of something heelish in that moment. Like, the Viking Raiders are the champion. We should be cheering for them to retain because they're the baby faces in this situation against that dastardly Judgment Day. It just feels like such a weird choice. And I'm not saying that this match was not properly vetted or agent. I'm not saying that JD McDonough went into business for himself. I just think it's a weird decision overall to go with a spectacular move done on the outside while the two legal men are still wrestling. It's a spectacular move that shouldn't be done by a heel and should have proper attention given to it. It's just confusing all around. And now that we've set the stage for this, let's talk about that Asahi Moonsault. And let me tell you, I watched this Moonsault many times, and there was something about it that bothered me. Besides the fact that JD McDonough goes crashing into that table, that was admittedly horrific, but there was something else that was just not sitting right with me about this Moonsault. So I watched it again and again and again, and I couldn't quite place it. So I watched just Ivar to see if maybe he did something I didn't like. And it looks like he does the best he can to catch JD. So it's not him. So then I watched JD McDonough to see, like, maybe he performed it wrong. Maybe there's something about the way he's rotating I don't like. But no, it is very crisp. He gets a lot of air. He rotates correctly. Everything looks right. So what was it that was bothering me? So I decided I'm going to go watch some other Asahi Moonsaults. You know, they're basically just lion salts to the outside, so there's a lot of them that took place. They were all over the Cruiserweight division in WCW. AJ Styles does them. Pac likes to do them from the top rope, which is spectacular. And in watching all of them, it started to dawn on me. JD is on the wrong side of my screen. Usually, I see them on the right side of my screen, going to the left side of my screen. And this was the other way around, because you usually do the Asahi Moonsault towards the entranceway. The entranceway is a big open space. It gives you way more room to land and situate yourself. The entryway is just an open area, while over by the timekeeper's area, there are barricades and tables and announcers and a nightmare. Because it is so much more compact, there's less places to go. Had this exact maneuver taken place on the other side of the ring, where the ramp is, JD McDonough probably would have landed on his feet. But because there was a table in the way, he was unable to do that. Now, I understand that is a bit harder to set up in this situation. You always have the babyface team in the same corner in WWE TV. They're always at the top corner and they're always closer to the entranceway. That's just the way it's set up. The heels are always closer to the desks and closer to the camera. This is because their backs are going to be to the camera, and you can see the baby faces face while they're reaching for that desperate tag. You get that baby face expression of like, come on, you can reach it. That's just good framing. But to then create this situation where Ivar is separated from his corner, you kind of have to do this spot near the tables. And there's just not enough room to safely do this spot. And while we're talking about it, it looks like those tables suck. Now, this is kind of speculation because, believe it or not, I haven't touched the new tables. But I don't believe that they're made out of hard oak, but they definitely don't look as soft as their previous tables. Like, I'm not saying that the previous tables were made out of pool noodle or anything, but the previous tables were made out of plywood at the hardest, particle board at the lightest, and also that like floppy plastic. In other words, there would have been give if the old table was there. He still would have crashed into it, but he probably would have ended up under the table and kind of breaking through that facade that they kept on the front, rather than bouncing off of it. So those tables, they need to serve a greater purpose than just looking nice if they're going to justify their existence in the world of professional wrestling. But that's just my opinion. And let's talk about those people who sit behind that table. Let's talk about the commentators. Because immediately after this happens, Cole loses his mind. You hear Cole say,
McDonough, my goodness, it looks, oh my God, JD McDonough may be knocked out cold. JD McDonough hit the back of his head on the announce table. Somebody better check on McDonough out here. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm serious about this. Somebody's got to check McDonough after that. McDonough's lucky he doesn't have a damn broken neck.
It's very clear to me that Cole, while still staying in character and trying to call the match, is legitimately calling to the back like, something horrible just happened. I mean, he probably had the best seat in the house to see what went down. And he is legitimately asking for help at that moment. And Pat McAfee makes a joke.
Yeah, we talk often about the size of his head. The thickness of it, I believe, just saved him.
You're right, and we're not saying that in a joking manner by any stretch.
You're not saying that in a joking manner. You're absolutely saying that in a joking manner. Pat McAfee is joking about the size of JD McDonough's head, which is a bit inappropriate at this moment. But that really shows the division of Michael Cole and Pat McAfee in that moment. Cole is legitimately saying, we need help out here. He's trying to get that message across. Pat trying to stay the course. Trying to just be like, oh, we're moving on. The heel's got a big head. Ha 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 ha. Inappropriate. Now, in retrospect, I understand why Pat did that in the moment. This is not me trying to come at Pat McAfee. Just saying, hey, that didn't age great. So at this point, I'm terrified for JD McDonough. And somehow, JD pulls himself up to the ropes. And at this moment, Dominic clearly goes over to JD and goes, are you okay? A little bit of a tangent here. I went to Greece a few years ago, and I was talking to some people there, and I made some friends along the way. And I will never forget, somebody asked me, why do Americans ask people if they're okay? And I was confused by this. I said, because we want to make sure that they're okay. They seem to be in trouble, and we want to make sure that they're okay. And they explained that in other countries, when you see someone in peril, you don't ask if they're okay. You ask how you can help. Because asking someone if they're okay, we as humans, and especially as Americans, are kind of trained to go, yes, I'm okay, no matter what. Or we might say something even more insane where we say yes and then explain exactly why we're not okay. Like, I think if you talk to any professional wrestler, they will have a story or subconsciously will say something like, hey, are you okay? Yeah, I just twisted my ankle real bad. It's giving me a bit of a limp. Well, then you're not okay. Your ankle is injured. So when asking a wrestler, are you okay? A professional wrestler 100% of the time will say yes. The only way "are you okay" works to check on someone is if they then don't respond. Because then you're like, oh, he's not okay. He's non-responsive. What really needs to be implemented into the world of professional wrestling is asking, what's wrong? You need to have that expectation of, we just watched what happened. We all have eyes, and we all live in human bodies and know that human bodies shouldn't do that. So the response should be, what's wrong? What's injured? And then he can respond correctly by saying like, oh, I'm pretty hurt. Because I'm not going to give it away yet, but JD's hurt. That shouldn't be a surprise if you've seen the clip. Because again, you're a human being, and you know bodies shouldn't do that. But somehow, JD gets up and gets asked, are you okay? And he says yes, and he tags into the match! He becomes the legal man, and that blew my mind. And when he's in there, he seems a little shaken. But for the most part, he seems to be acting appropriately. He takes a vicious shot to the jaw that scared the hell out of me, because I'm pretty sure he's concussed at this moment. Turns out I'm wrong, but that's what I'm thinking. He fires back, and it looks good, and he tags out. And I was like, okay, so maybe that was JD jumping in there being like, do I feel okay? Let me just tangle, I know where I am in space. Okay, I'm good. Dom, take over, we can continue. And the match does continue, and JD gets in there again. And then, a very interesting thing happens. JD gets sent into the corner, and they do the up and over, or the flag spot, where JD grabs the top ropes, kind of goes up at an angle, and I believe it's Ivar runs underneath, and he lands behind him. It's a great little spot. And when JD lands, he grabs his ribs. In terms of wrestling storytelling, there's not a good reason for him to be grabbing his ribs. At this point, we've seen him ricochet off that table, and I think he has a concussion, so I wouldn't have been surprised if he grabbed his head, but that would be a bad sign. Usually, if you need to do the flag spot and you stagger, you kind of sell your ankle, like, ooh, I landed uncomfortably. But simply landing on your feet should not make you grab your ribs. This should have been a sign to everyone involved, like, that's wrong. Something should be done here. And I understand that, in the moment, it's hard to make that call. It's hard to really say in that second to be like, this is a man who can't continue. So I'm not going to be upset and say, from my chair, watching this frame by frame, that someone made a mistake by not ending the match right there. However, the next little bit of this match blows my mind. JD runs to the outside, and I immediately think it's because he's hurt. But no, he's doing the next spot in the match. It's clear at this point, they're not changing anything. It's not going to a quick finish at this point. The match is staying what the match is. JD does a great thing where he ducks out of the way. One of the Viking Raiders wipes himself out on the timekeeper's area. Things are looking good. JD looks good. And then we see JD selling on the ground, and you see him grit his teeth. It's like, that's a bit weird. Is he hurt? But no, he gets up again. And then Eric is standing up on the timekeeper's area, and hits a cannonball from the timekeeper's area to the floor, wiping out JD and Dom. This makes sense because they're really big guys and they're baby faces, so they should be doing amazing things. But anyway, they hit the ground. It looks like Dom tries to take the brunt of it so that JD is okay. And also, for some reason, A-Town Down are in the background. That confused me a little bit. I was like, oh, look, they're taking selfies. Why are they there? Interesting. And then the most mind-blowing thing happens. And then, if you haven't watched this match, this is the thing I don't think enough people are talking about. And then they go to commercial. I had no idea that happened until I sat down and watched this match. I watched tons of pundits talk about it, of like, JD got hurt. There was a few moves that rocked his head that I think were a bad idea, and then he collapsed afterwards after finishing the match. No one seems to be talking about the fact that at some point during this match, the cameras go off. And I understand that, like, they're still in front of a lot of people, but what normally happens during a commercial break is a nice, tight rest hold. And during a rest hold, you can check out people and make sure that they're fine. And at this point, a doctor should have been on the outside checking on JD. And not saying, are you okay? They need to be saying, what hurts? And then JD can be like, my ribs hurt. And then the doctor can check the ribs. It is insane to me that we come back to just the match. And you might be sitting there and thinking that Scott's being an old man yelling, JD wanted to do this. And, the match had a conclusion already planned. There was no way out of this situation. Turns out, there are hundreds of ways out of this situation. You could have very easily had this match get broken up by A-Town Down. Or A-Town Down Under, excuse me. They're at ringside. You could have this end in a DQ at any moment. And that would protect whatever finish you were building to, because you could just do it later. We come back from this commercial, though. JD's in the ring again. Now, that being said, JD looks pretty good. He's slowing down a bit, but he's looking pretty good. He takes one of those springboard elbows where the Viking Raiders do like a handstand, hit the ropes, come back, hits an elbow. Immediately, JD grabs his ribs. There's this weird thing about this, that anytime JD is wrestling, he looks fine. Anytime JD hits the mat, he's suffering. At this point, JD tags out, but he doesn't get out of the ring. He just lays there, like, partly still in the ring, suffering, and nobody's talking to him. Then we have this insane JD spot where he gets into a full Nelson and takes like this combination Uncle Slam go to sleep. If you don't know, sidebar, hey, come close. I'm a big fan of Sal Sincere. You remember Sal Sincere? His finishing maneuver was the Sincerely Yours, which was he put you into a full Nelson, lift you up, and slam you down. He like turns it into a half Nelson, slams you down. You might think, no, I think that's the Patriots move. Nah. In any case, I love that move. So as soon as I saw, full Nelson, I actually really like this move. And then he combos that into a knee to the back of the head. And it looks like JD is being decapitated. Now, I understand that he doesn't have a concussion. But at this point, after the commercial break, and after everyone in the match knows the events that have gone down in the match, maybe don't do that move. Maybe let's be a little bit careful with JD. Please. So, JD takes that, commentary starts joking again. Pat McAfee's again talking about how it's unbelievable the strength of JD's neck. It's probably because he's carrying around that big head of his. Cole, though, also sprinkles in some praise to JD. He says that he takes back everything he said about JD. He's one of the toughest guys he's ever seen. Kind of to balance out what Pat McAfee says. And then Cole immediately goes back on the offense and says, yeah, he's got to carry Dominic Mysterio around with him. Blah. I get it, they're heels. They got to have some sort of scumbaggery involved. But it still feels weird that they're making these jokes about the size of his head at this point in the match. They replay the spot with the full Nelson. It looks even more horrible in slow motion, but that's what slow motion should do. JD, once again, looks dead. He looks like he's absolutely demolished at this point. And they pick him up for whatever they're calling the Viking Experience now. That's what their finisher. I think they just call it the War Raiders now. And JD counters it. JD goes from looking like he is completely dead. He's completely dead on the mat to I'm a competent wrestler, nothing's wrong with me. It surprises me every time. I watched it a few times, and every time I'm like, oh wait, no, JD is fine. I know for a fact he's not. I've seen what's wrong with him. I'm still watching this going, oh, maybe he's okay. Maybe he's completely okay. JD hits like this weird, like, capture top rope belly to belly that looks awesome. JD's my new favorite wrestler from that. Looks great. And then Carlito shows up. Now, I've watched it a few times. I'm not sure how this happens. But I think JD, or I believe Carlito, is under the ring. Which means when they went to commercial, there was someone who could have replaced JD under the ring the whole time. Would you have been upset as a viewer if they went to commercial, they came back, and they just went, now Dominic Mysterio and Carlito versus the War Raiders, apparently free bird rules? That would be fine. The match would still probably be pretty good, sure. Carlito might not know all the spots, but he's a veteran. We can figure this out and protect a human being. But again, this is me sitting back playing Monday morning quarterback. In the moment, I know it's harder to make those choices, but you did have a commercial break to figure it out. Just saying, you had that commercial break to figure it out. JD, still in this match, then hits a moonsault. Like, think about that. I once hurt myself doing a front flip on a trampoline and have never been able to do it again. Just there's like a mental block about it. JD almost split his body into multiple pieces doing a moonsault and does one, still hurt, like 4 minutes later. An unbelievable performance. This is when I notice the referee leans over and talks to him. There's this moment where JD, and I keep doing this, there's this thing JD does where he pushes his elbows into the mat and grits his teeth. And that's how I know he's hurt. And the ref leans over and says something to him, and then clearly hits like a button and reports back to the back. I can only assume that conversation is, you okay? Can you continue? And JD going, yeah, I can continue. That's not really checking. And the referee actually said on Twitter, I saw in his eyes that there was nothing I could do to stop him. Yeah, there was, man. Like, your job is to stop him and save him from himself. Like, that's true about every boxer that's been knocked out, you know? They all think, oh, I could keep going. That's just what's in him. I'm sorry, and I don't want to light up this referee, but if your argument is he wanted to keep going, that's not a great argument. You could say I didn't realize. You could say I saw him in the ring and just assumed he was fine. I saw him take that bump on that table and thought there's no way, and then was baffled to see him standing, and I just had to assume he was fine. But taking a wrestler at his word that he's able to continue, should not be common practice anymore. It just shouldn't be. So, we then head towards the end of the match. The final thing we see JD do, and this is a small thing, but I do want to point it out. JD goes over the top rope to the floor. And JD does something that a veteran normally wouldn't do. He clips the apron on the way down. And I've always been told, if you're hitting the apron when going over the top rope, that better be your end point. Because if you try to use it to just kind of soften your blow, as kind of like, here's a little stopping point and then I'll keep rolling, all you're doing is adding more angles and velocity to yourself, and that's how you turn yourself into a position you don't want to be in when you hit the floor. It is much safer to go from over the top rope to the floor than over the top rope, clip the apron to the floor. Sure, you might be thinking I'm slowing my momentum, but no, it's too unpredictable to do that to yourself. And the fact that JD does that there makes me think he knew he was hurt and was trying to soften his blow. It's his body, and he's doing what he thinks is best. This is not me saying he botched going over the top rope. I'm saying there was something in JD that made him go, I don't want to do this, where I go from the ring to the floor. I mean, think about it. He did the up and over spot, and that hurt his ribs. Him controlling his own movements and landing on his feet was too much impact for his ribs. You would imagine that a further fall would also be bad news. And then Dominic Mysterio eats the War Raiders or the Viking Experience, and the Viking Raiders retain. There was not a title change, so it wasn't really important that that match not end abruptly or go to a DQ or anything like that. But in the end, it's a great match. And again, I am sitting here playing Monday morning quarterback, breaking it down with a fine-tooth comb, going over every little spot where I'm like, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. And in the moment, it is hard to make those decisions. But somebody needs to. And the fact that no one did is going to be a huge problem. And that's for this reason. JD, when he collapsed backstage, they released, what happened to him. He had broken ribs, multiple ribs, and a punctured lung. And people are praising him for this. They're saying, I can't believe he was able to do this with that injury. And it is absolutely incredible, the performance he put on there. Like, I mentioned before that JD was the lowest member of what is a comedy stable. He is the bottom tier. Last year in the Royal Rumble, his role in the Royal Rumble was a comedy spot for R-Truth. He got in, and then he got immediately thrown out. He was the joke member of this group. But no longer. After that performance and the sympathy that the crowd now has and respect for this man, he's going to return in, I think, 5 months is what they said. A huge superstar now. Like, I've already heard comparisons to Triple H when he tore his quad during that Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho tag match. I'm hearing comparisons to when Nia Jax broke Becky's nose, and Becky, covered with blood, just owned it rather than selling an injury. And that's bad. Because what this move really does, what that Asahi Moonsault really did, is it's going to reinforce that you don't stop wrestling. I talked about all the outs for this. That A-Town Down Under could have interfered, that they could have just stopped the match, that they could have ended the match early, that Carlito could have taken his spot. And if all of those things happened, I would say no one would be upset. But JD McDonough was not have gotten the shine that he has on him, that he has now. We are going to reinforce the idea that if you're hurt, you keep going. Not only because you're tough, not only because you're protecting the business, but because you will be rewarded for putting your body through that. And I want to end by saying this. I hate that JD got injured, and it's horrible. And I don't want to take anything away from his performance. But his injuries are broken ribs and a punctured lung. You know how you usually get a punctured lung? It's usually the result of broken ribs. Because your ribs are broken. There's now like a jagged, sharp thing in your body by your lungs. How do we know that that happened on that Asahi Moonsault? How do we know that that's what caused the punctured lung? I would guess that it definitely caused the broken ribs. But had he not wrestled the rest of that match, would we be talking about a punctured lung right now? Again, this is me speculating. I can only really look at what the facts are. And I can tell you right now, the facts are JD McDonough became a bigger star because of that performance. And the next wrestler that gets hurt in the ring is going to remember that. They're going to remember that when JD returns, he's going to be a bigger star. They're going to remember that when the ref said, "Are you okay?" he said yes and kept going. And is that something we really want to reinforce? This is a much more serious video than I was planning to put out. So, why don't you watch one of the funnier videos that are about to pop on screen? They're more cheeky and fun and give you a good laugh. And also, be sure to subscribe right here to Plus 2 Wrestling, because next week, hopefully, I'll actually get out my top 10 wrestlers to watch in 2025. Yeah, that's still going to be relevant in February, right? That still makes sense? In any case, thank you so much for joining me here on Plus 2 Wrestling. And I hope you have a great day.